kind of not starting, but maybe embarrassing, with awareness this morning. I realized that I had been thinking of the radiance, like these sparklers that we were talking about. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I actually had envisioned, the sparklers. But I was actually feeling what it felt like to just feel the body moving and just this movement, and realize that this radiance is just massive, vast, and is everything.
Good.
Happening all at once.
Good.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so obvious, but I had these little sparkles. But it's just
the imaginary radiance instead of the actual radiance.
yeah. I mean, if you just feel, just your own world.
That's wonderful. That's very good.
Feeling that that's just a minuscule part of this huge, vast radiance happening.
Yeah. Good.
That is so unconditional. I mean, it just does anything, everything that just appears.
Yeah.
Without any kind of priority or anything there. And it's just coming forth.
Yeah, it's the real thing. Not like Coke. We can get these broadcasts sponsored if we do some product placement. What do you think? Get some cash flow going.
Get there with your Prius.
That's wonderful. That's really good. 2 thumbs up. But this is actual. I mean, it's just, and it's not some special actual. It's this actual that is right here. This actual is the actual. This small actual, small letter A actual is the big letter A actual. I think that's probably the biggest single stumbling block that people that work with spirituality trip over, which they're looking for something over there, something far away, something grand, something, just it's somewhere, it's incredible, but it's over there somewhere. And if only you can figure out how to get from here to there, And to get that, no, it's what's right here. That's where the value is, where the juice is. It's subtle why it should be difficult to get that, and it's evidently subtle to get that. But once you get it, it's like a ton of bricks. It's like, oh, well, duh. It's all about this, not that, this.
So Piers, do you mean that the experience is the radiance?
Yes. If it's showing up as anything whatsoever, it's radiance. Radiance is the sole building block that anything and everything whatsoever that can show up in any degree whatsoever is made of. And calling it radiance is arbitrary. It's not that it corresponds to that, although it's meaningful to use that word. But what it is itself. It's not. It doesn't. It's not this. Doesn't have to correspond to some definition of what radiance is. Radiance happens to indicate this in some meaningful way. So it's a nice term to use. But we're talking about this, just the substance of your experience, or you could say the energy of your experience, because the substance and the energy are one. Because the substance shows up as an energy, as a dynamism, right, as a mobility, whatever. So the radiance is all of that, inclusive.
So when you're experiencing a radiance, would you experience anything other than the experience?
No, of course not. Radiance is experience. Equals. Instead of using the word radiance, just use the word experience. The word isn't special. It's just, it indicates a certain dynamic and instantaneous aspect of experience, although it doesn't need to be indicated because it's self-evident if you look. But that's the entire well, just the entirety of spirituality is seeing what your experience is, and especially noticing that what it actually is in no way corresponds to anything you've ever thought it is, or anything you can think it is. And so therefore everything you've thought it is, all your definitions of yourself and life and the purpose and what's going on and etc., absolutely inclusive, everything that could or be thought or said, every word that's ever been written in any book, none of it actually applies or describes accurately what this actually is, this experience, this radiance. And simply noticing that, you are freed from being entrapped in that spider web of implication of all of these narratives, and you get to experience this itself naked, and see, of course you can immediately see how it is, see what it is, and you discover that it is absolutely staggering. It's wonderful. It's astounding. It's you could just start heaping the superlatives on. And you are this condition. You are not that defined condition. You are not that person who has been defined by descriptions. You are not living that life that has been defined by descriptions. You are this actuality right here, which is absolutely wonderful. And the fact that that is the case, and as you come to see what that actually means, you discover that you intrinsically possess qualities that are exquisite. You are immortal, you are beyond space and time, you are pure hyper-intelligence, you are pure creativity. You should come to see this very directly, because that's what this quite clearly is. Very fortunately, it turns out that it's even better than all the religious texts have said. It's even better than that.
have some drugs on your way to LA yesterday?
No more than usual. Caffeine and sugar.
Peter, I find it interesting how blatant or shocking this is. I mean, in my face. I mean, I could say, well, let's say I've looked at that tree, and most times it's just a tree. But if I stop to know enough, it's just like, boom. And that's with sight. It can be with sound. It can be without almost any of the senses in a way. I don't know. I still haven't figured out how I experience this without my senses, but I think I do. Some kind of sense, some hidden sense.
Yeah, the absolute, and I mean absolute immediacy and absolute intimacy of any and all experience is intrinsic in what this is. You know, and when we're with our experience in various worldviews, we can imagine distance and imagine separation and imagine self and other and all these kinds of things, which kind of puts an implication of distance or, at once or twice removed in terms of any particular experience. But when you notice what experience actually is, you notice it's happening in you. It is completely, absolutely, it's a touching. When you experience something, you're touching it.
Yeah.
Sort of non-spatially. You're touching it, you might say, with consciousness or whatever. But all of that's just euphemism and sort of pointless. But it's an absolute intimacy, an absolute immediacy. And this is quite apparent when you are with experience non-relationally, non-conceptually. The experience is actual, it's present, it's immediate, it's instantaneous, it is
There's just
final.
there's just no way a concept could handle this particular experience.
No, it just can't be done. Because the evidence of the fact, the evidence of the experiential fact is completely non-conceptual. And it's completely undeniable and self-evident. This immediacy is so obvious, and so self-verifying. It's just oh yeah. You can't argue with it or define it or deconstruct it or anything. It's just a given. It's just a complete obvious self-verifying actuality. And that's the nature of what this is. That's the nature of this reality. The absolute self-verifying, intrinsically self-verifying actuality of it completely trumps any abstraction whatsoever, no matter how sophisticated and artful you could come up with and claim had any validity at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me dumb. Dumb in the speech.
Yeah, absolutely. This completely transcends speech, transcends thought, without needing to eradicate it or not have it happen. It's just, it's primal, absolutely primal.
So what is it that some people report that they do experience it like that? And some people go into all kinds of theories, wanting to be spiritual, whatever, and sort of not reporting it and not feeling it. Why does it happen?
You are unable to clearly see what your experience actually is until you reach a certain point, a certain spontaneous point of maturity. Called spiritual maturity or whatever. It's kind of you can't pin down what it is. Until you do that, no matter how well intentioned you are, no matter how intelligent you are going to be approaching it heavy-handedly through your concepts, because that's what we've been programmed to do. That's what we generally have been educated to do, and that's our inclination. And when we reach sufficient maturity, we develop the capacity to assimilate this presence directly and immediately and notice how profound it is.
Is it maturity or is it becoming naive as a child or getting things as they are as children?
Well, you can't isolate it because that always happens individually, you can't generalize. Everyone's maturity, you could say, is constituted by their nature and their history. So, and certainly what happens in childhood is relevant, whether or not it's causal or just like circumstantial. we can't really say, but it certainly is. It's a package deal. I mean, everything comes with it. And since you can't take someone and go back and do it a different way, you can't have a control system to know whether or not, oh, yeah, that's the factor they're doing. All you can do is empirically observe that it is possible to be with experience very nakedly, very profoundly, and there's no way to predict who is able to do it and who isn't. You can't tell by superficial characteristics or by anything really. It can't be gauged. It can't be controlled. People spontaneously come to a certain point where they have an intrinsic urge to mature, to transcend, to go beyond their childish approach to their life. You get serious. You get real. You really want to know sufficiently that you can even handle the what's the word? Handle the humbling effect on your ego of discovering that all your previous ways of doing it were completely wrong, completely ineffective, and all the things we're so proudest of about ourselves are basically beside the point.
Well, if all these concepts and the strong desire to figure things out are always done in our way, shouldn't it be easier for somebody who's totally unsophisticated, as children?
Well, they don't stand in our way. They are part and parcel of coming to see this.
You have to go through some wrong ways to see what it is.
Hard to say if you have to, but certainly most people seem to. I mean, it may be that someone, the child, can just see this and acknowledge it and stay with it and rest in that and never depart from it. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen that I've been aware of personally. But that doesn't mean anything. Anything can happen. But if that happens, that just means that person is mature enough to be able to function with that level of integrity. And you can't say why that is. The genetic structure, their past lives karma. I mean, God knows. But certainly, it's empirically obvious that they have sufficient maturity to do so if they do. And that's all you can really say, because there's so many factors and qualities that seem to be associated with it, and you can't deconstruct it or make sense of how it works, or for that matter, how anything works. All you can notice is there's this gestalt of phenomena, this cloud of histories and qualities and natures that sort of we're sort of embedded in as beings, and all of those reflect and possibly participate in our level of functioning.
Aren't those things also just appear spontaneously with no causality at all?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm saying that's what I'm saying. You can't know whether or not there's causality. All you can do is notice that these qualities can be said to be present to some degree, but you can't say what that means or anything.
But it's not necessarily dependent on your ability to see them or to understand them.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying in terms of trying to figure out what factors contribute to sufficient spiritual maturity, and you can't do it. It can't be done because it's completely non-linear. It can't be deconstructed.
Yes.
I mean, you can call it grace. You can call it that kind of a thing, which is, I mean, it has various implications, but it's meaningful in the sense of it's like lightning striking. Well, why did lightning strike there? Well, if you knew the exact, electronic potential of every molecule in a 50-mile radius and the exact wind velocities and blah, 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 you could tell exactly where the lightning was going to strike or something. It's like, maybe not, Who knows? But in practice, there's not a lot you can do. You have to have. You can't fake it. You can't construct maturity. On the other hand, maturity comes when it comes, and you can't stop it either. So that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with people who at a given moment lack sufficient maturity for them to still be exploring this stuff and approaching it. They'll just do so on a level that they can approach. I mean, we're talking about a kind of a finishing school here. We're talking about a level of moving into a whole new relationship to spirituality which transcends a human level. But there's all sorts of human levels of being with spirituality which are quite well-intentioned, quite sincere, I mean many of them, and not necessarily a waste of time. But in the context of this, in the context of really transcending being with your experience in terms of any kind of a frame of reference, that is a different paradigm, and that's really what we're talking about here. And that doesn't invalidate these other approaches, but they are essentially have little to do with this, except that in most cases you can see that they precede it historically.
We're kind of walking in an area where the lightning strikes once in a while.
Right.
Continued strikes.
Right. Sure. Only it's not so arbitrary, because when this particular lightning strikes, it's because you're ready for it to.
What does it mean to be ready?
Can't be said. You can just observe that it is the case. If it strikes, then you must have been ready. And if you find yourself seriously participating in investigation at a deep level, at this kind of a level, then that can be an indication that you might be a fair target to be a lightning rod.
In relation to what Irina was saying about maybe a child coming to this, it seems that it's part of the maturing is somehow experiencing concepts or trouble or problems or stories, sort of getting lighter, or I mean, they just. And then sort of simultaneously, you're sort of saying this, but there seems there's sort of experience of concepts and thoughts and the storyline, just sort of receding.
I mean, we can certainly say that seems to be generally the case, but you can't say if it needs to be so. But all this discussion is kind of theoretical and beside the point. Because what's really interesting and what's vital is what is happening with you now. Yeah. And so I mean you, particularly you. I mean any you, me, and so which is not theoretical. Your condition, your nature, your experience right here and right now is not a concept, is not a theory, is not an idea, is not a generalization. It's extremely actual. And that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
I just say, and I've said this, or talked about this over and over again, about how this has just always been here.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what the word "always,"
absolutely.
It's that sort of a linear thing, but it's good enough for me right now.
Yeah, that's very characteristic. When you see this, you'll go, it's you're amazed at how familiar it is. It's like, oh, I've always known this, and at the same time, there's just I always known this, but I never saw it. I always known it.
That's what I'm saying. Why did I ever see
and there's no way you can say how that works or what that is either, but it's self-evident and it's universal. People that have this experience of some degree of realization, that's always like that, because it's just normalcy. It's just reality. It's just being, which of course we're all completely familiar with and always have been. But to really appreciate what it is and how profound it is, it doesn't become less familiar. It still is what you've always known and what you've always been familiar with, but you sort of you see it completely, you see it profoundly. And so again, even though it is something you've always known, it's also, oh my God, and I never knew. I've always known and I never knew.
Yeah. Yeah, well that might just be the best definition of what this is. I don't know, but so to me it's just a real paradoxical.
This is intrinsically paradoxical. I mean, a good sign that you're being with it more profoundly is if it's just makes absolutely no sense and is completely paradoxical in infinite dimensions simultaneously. That's what it looks like. That's what it is. If it makes any sense or seems to have any coherence, it's a pretty good sign that you've strayed into fantasy.
And I guess that's sort of why we laugh so much. It's just
it's really fun.
Yeah.
If you read the Dzogchen text, you can read, and every third or fourth word is these words: wonderful, amazing, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
And it's quite appropriate because it's so profound. Sort of passingly pithy and profound and meaningful things can be said about it, but it transcends all of those. So I mean, it's just exquisite.
Sort of the word transformative comes to mind, or the principle of alchemy. I mean, it's as I said, it's always there. It's always been this, but maybe that was something. I sort of tend to think that was some kind of pure state, or just. Just sort of existing on its own, and then all of a sudden some transformation happened, and it became shown more powerfully. So some type of transformation has to.
Well, what transforms is not it or you, but the way that you are with it. So that you are with it as it is with it, instead of being with it as it is over there and you're over here.
Yeah.
And you see that your being with it is actually its being with it. And I mean, there's a profound perspective of integration that occurs, which feels like transformation, but of course nothing is actually changed, because the condition is as it is. It does not develop.
Right. But the word seem is a powerful word.
It is indeed. It is indeed. This is all about seeming. Spiritual delusion is a seeming. And for that matter, realization is a seeming. The actual objective condition is always what it is. It doesn't change one iota. The mechanism of realization is always just coincidence, which means that sufficient things happen and come together to affect a profound seeing. You find yourself in a certain condition of readiness or whatever, and you have a certain history, and you find yourself, exposed perhaps to certain various influences, and all of these things come together at a certain time, if they do, and in that coincidence, the spark can jump, so to speak. And I think people who have realization experiences, it can always be arguably just, looked at in those terms. And you can't say whether that's causal or not. You can't say whether there's, sort of some kind of a destined confluence of circumstances, but you can't say it's not, is it? You just can't say. All you can do is observe the fact that is the case. So
seems like if you experience something extraordinary, like you're really ill or something happens out of the blue, there's kind of a chance for this to happen.
absolutely. Sure.
As a reaction.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
And all of a sudden, quiet bodies or everything comes back.
Yeah. I mean, anything that shocks you out of your status quo, out of your normal dullness and your habitual approach to your life, can be of enormous benefit in that. Of course. Yeah.
The Indians and Tibetans speak a great deal about attachment and aversion.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding with what you talk about a lot is that if one can let go of attachments and aversions, then those things, then those things are no longer in the way to sort of cloud pristine awareness.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, except that there's a very simpler attachment and aversion. Freedom from attachment and aversion is more of an effect than it is a cause. In other words, the simplest way to be free of attachment and aversion is to directly see that there exists in actuality nothing whatsoever to be attached to, or nothing whatsoever to try and avoid. It just intrinsically does not happen to exist. And when you see that, then attachment and aversion fall away by themselves without needing to try to diminish them or stop them or something like that. That's the difficult way, the challenging way, the really rough uphill struggle is to do it that way. I have to, let me see, I feel some attachment, I better start trying to tune it down or something, Whereas when you just see that, there's nothing here but experience, and experience is dynamic in real time. It completely, any conditions whatsoever that appear completely and instantaneously disappear in real time. So there is nothing that persists with sufficient stability to be attached to it, because it's already morphed and mutated into something else. And you, that includes you and your life and the circumstances of your life. So even if you could attach to something, you can't attach to yourself. You're already becoming something else. So all the circumstances in your life are slipping away in real time, becoming something else. They're evolving, you might say. And you are evolving, and you can't stop that. That's unstoppable. So how can you find anything that you could actually have? Because it's already gone. It's already become something else. Because it's not a thing. It's not a condition. It's just an experience. An experience is supremely fluid and unstable and unconcrete, you might say. And so when you see that nakedly and factually and self-verifyingly, then you don't need to do anything about attachment and aversion, because they become non-issues. Because it's like you're seeing it. It's like if you saw this was a dream, you'd say, the dream, what are you going to, suppose you grabbed something in your dream last night. Where is it now? What good does it do you to grab it, And if you could see at the time that it was a dream, you would laugh. You'd say, why grab it? It's here now, and it's growing somewhere right now, and something else will come, and so the very nature of things is ungraspable and slippery. So orienting towards it in terms of trying to grab it or trying to push it away is just it's very inaccurate. And simply seeing what this is takes the wind out of the sails of those approaches to experience. It is proved to be. They're not workable, because the nature of what this intrinsically is, those actions just don't actually apply to it. And except in fantasy, it's like you try and grasp something or hold something, and what good does it do? You age, it ages, circumstances happen, everything morphs and changes, and then it's like trying to hold on to your youth. Good luck. It can't be done. And everything, all conditions whatsoever are like that. They're like youth. They come when they come. They're here when they're here, and they go when they go. And even when they're here, you can't own them or have them or even say what they are, because they're so intrinsically multidimensional.
I understand, yes. I can understand that for attachments. The fear of death of the body, though, is a powerful primal feeling that so that when you see when you have a direct connection with the experience, so there must be something that makes that irrelevant somehow.
Well, it does, exactly, because you discover that the body doesn't actually exist as you think it does, and death is just a fantasy. Death doesn't exist as you think it does. The fear of death is orienting towards a fantasy. No one knows what death is. It's the fantasy that, oh, all this is going to stop, or whatever. I mean, whatever the particular fantasy is. And that is a fantasy. If everything was stopping, then you could talk about it as an actuality. But to say everything's going to stop is a fantasy you're having sitting here now when everything is manifestly not stopping, or whatever. I mean, death is death. So death. So it's like the boogeyman. Gosh, there might be a boogeyman hiding in that closet over there. Yeah, there might. But the thought is a fantasy, and until a boogeyman comes out of the closet and runs after you, it's a fantasy. So why be afraid of it? If a boogeyman does come out, then you have a realistic basis for reacting to it. But to react to the possibility that it might be that way, all this might end, and that would mean what, the death of the body. Well, what exactly is the body? And then again, when you see what this is directly, you discover that the body itself is also a fantasy, because it's an arbitrary grouping of qualities which are dynamic, which are spontaneous, and which are completely unstable, and in fact not intrinsically related to each other, and you hold it together. We imagine, there's this body and it exists and it's made of matter and it's solid and persistent and it has a precarious state of maintaining its health, and it's like a machine that's sort of running along, but all of that way of describing it is a fantasy. Exists in imagination only, just like the idea of death, as we sit here talking, exists in imagination only. And so relating to that as if it was an actuality is again a symptom of not seeing reality, because you are supposing that your idea is true when in fact it is not. It's just an idea, it's a possibility, it's a fantasy. And when you see what is true, what does the body consist of? What's the evidence for the body? The actual evidence for the body is the presence of experience. Okay, cool. So I'm all for that. So what exactly is this experience that is here? So if that's the evidence for the body, which obviously it must be, right? What is it? What is this experience actually? What does it consist of? And in going to that, you discover right away that experience is very strange. It has a lot of properties, a lot of very, very subtle and intrinsically multidimensional and transcendental properties that our heavy-handed materialistic ideas of it don't conform with. And so a sort of a mechanistic or a materialistic idea of a body that works and that it was created and is going to stop turns out to be much too simplistic and too heavy-handed, and does not actually address the actual fact of what experience really is and how it works. So I completely recommend that, is look at your experience nakedly without any preconceptions. Just start over again. Assume everything you've ever thought or been told about what's going on here, what experience is wrong, or at least to suspend it as it might be wrong. It might be inaccurate, okay? And look for yourself and discover for yourself. Assume that you've been associating all your life with crazy people who have everything completely wrong, and so everything that they've ever told you, you've ever read, or you've ever suggested to think about is just completely nuts. And then come back to the raw data for yourself and investigate. So what is it so here's experience. Okay, that is pretty much undeniable. Experience refers to this that is present here as my experience. So what is it? Well, that's a very interesting question. What is it? And by being with that, then once you get some mileage at that, once you make some progress at really seeing, well, what is this? How does it work? What is it that is present? How is it present? When and where is it present? What's it based on? What's it existing in? just sort of looking at what's actually happening here, afresh, free of preconceptions. Then after you make some headway with that, then you can look at the context that suggests itself and look for yourself if the idea of a body that exists materially and is going to end still makes sense, still has evidence to support it.
Is this when you would see the body inside your consciousness?
Well, sure. I mean, for one. I mean, clearly the body exists in your consciousness.
Well, in as much as the world also. I mean,
sure.
It's certain, not very often, of course, but I mean, it's sometimes in my meditation, I can, all of my consciousness starts to sort of feel like this bubble, and everything is that normally would seem to be real is inside this bubble.
Sure.
And it's all inside, really just inside the consciousness.
Sure.
Anyway,
as far as we can tell.
Right.
Which is as far as you can go, because anything else is theory. Yeah, there may be an objective world, but if all I can access is in my consciousness, then it's irrelevant whether or not there is, because I can't possibly know that. I mean, not possibly, not even get a hint of it.
So,
for example, I mean, that's just one possible aspect or line of investigation in that. But again, to start with that, okay, here's this bubble of experience. I call it my experience. I may as well call it me. I mean, however you relate to it, here it is. So what is it? In its terms, not in terms of what I've been told it is and all these theories and ideas and so on and so forth. But what is it undeniably demonstrate itself to be? In other words, what is it showing you that it is, rather than what you're used to telling it that it is? I mean, we're used to telling it, no, this consciousness is just a byproduct of my central nervous system and the biochemistry in my nerves, and this consciousness, came to birth, started functioning after my body reached a certain level of development, and it's like turning the key in your car, and like the spark clicks after a while, and all of a sudden there's internal combustion firing. So, I mean, we all, have this sort of materialistic model. I mean, not we all, but let's say many people do have this sort of materialistic model as consciousness is a byproduct of some functioning of a machine, and the body is that machine. But you can look, well, okay, that's a theory. Sure, it's a viable theory. But in terms of experience, just the naked, raw presence of experience, without any a priori assumptions, what does it say it is? Does it suggest that that's what's happening? And I would say that in my investigation, experience suggests that first of all, it's not caused by anything, because it has absolutely no change in its condition. The body can be healthy or sick, the body can be conscious or unconscious, but experience is just crystalline sameness. Experience itself, what it looks like, obviously, is wildly variable. So that's another factor. So it's something that is itself and never departs from itself, but never looks the same in two instances. And also, when you look at what's happening in any moment within experience, I mean, again, this is just me asserting things that I've discovered, and you can investigate them for yourself, because coming from me is useless, because I'm just another crazy person as far as you know. You have to look for yourself and see for yourself what's true. But another thing that I notice is that when you look at experience, it's intrinsically multidimensional. You cannot say conclusively exactly what anything consists of. You can't get to the bottom of the full information that's present in any aspect of experience. So you can know, you can know just incredible amounts of an experience. I look at this bottle and I'm bombarded with information of, colors and shapes and contrasts and density and sensation of touch, with astounding variety. I mean, this inconceivable bandwidth of information. but the information isn't coherent. It doesn't clump together into nice, neat sets. It's wildly different. And I look at the bottle and I think thoughts and I feel moods and I hallucinate, and I mean there's just this astounding cloud of data that presents itself in association with any and all experience, and it doesn't lend itself, again in terms of my research, it doesn't lend itself into coming up with coherent wholenesses, coherent gestalts where you can say, oh yeah, this is that. You know, you can sort of draw a circle around it and say, yeah, that's what it is. Everything that's inside this circle is this. You know, so experience is intrinsically slippery. Very much in the same way that dreams are slippery. You know, you can look in a dream and you can see something relatively sharply or precisely. You can see a person walking up to you and all that, but then you look close and then things start to get a little slippery because it's a dream. It's not precise. It's not sharp. You can't concretize it or solidify it. And it turns out our waking experience seems to share a whole lot of those kinds of qualities too. So even though it presents itself with an astounding amount of detail and specificity, right, in terms of just the actual concrete specifics that you actually experience in the moment, at the same time, all of those specifics are a little fuzzy, a little indeterminate, a little hard to pin down, which is a very strange state of affairs, and so on and so forth. So anyway, you know, after looking at experience itself in its own terms, just not without any expectations, it proves to be a whole. Experience is always just experience. Experience is never not experience. Experience doesn't ever become something else. And experience is intrinsically unfindable. You know, the conditions that you can't find what experience is. You can't find what it's made of. You look at all the specifics that it seems to be presenting as, and you can't find what they are, and they've already become something else in the next instant, and so on and so forth. So experience itself presents itself as this very fascinating phenomenon that is, you know, incredibly dynamic, incredibly slippery, incredibly sort of self-transcending in terms of whatever seems to be. It's also more than that at the same time, in a way that doesn't make any sense at all. It's very non-linear and irrational. You know, you can't wrap your head around it. So, you know, I use this word slippery, which kind of seems to apply rather nicely. You know, it's vague enough to cover a lot of ground. You know, and on that basis, how much weight does the materialist hypothesis hold? You know, and it starts to be where you have to shoehorn it a lot. I mean, there's sort of two worlds that present themselves. One is the actual world of your experience, and the other is a supposed materialistic world where, you know, atoms are banging up against atoms, and the way that they bang up against it is the reason why everything happens. But anyway, I mean, that's kind of a long diatribe, but you know, it indicates that, you know, I mean, my basic formula is experience is not what we're used to thinking it is. It's not what we can think it is, but we can see what it is. And remember, if we look, we will see what it is, and we will see that it is amazing. And what this is has to be based upon and exist within the quality of that amazing nature.
This discussion started with being afraid of dying and death. And then he moved into explaining why materialistic view doesn't make sense. But to me, and maybe I don't understand your throughout, but to me these things seem to be different. I think you can be materialistic and think everything consists of atoms and still not see death as a problem.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I think death is a problem because we're thinking that we somehow do things that make things happen. And say if people we know die, we wouldn't be able to communicate with them. And we're out of control. If we die, say if I die now, I wouldn't be able to wash the dishes and do other things that I planned for tomorrow. It's a problem. If I know that I cannot...
It wouldn't be a problem then. It wouldn't be a problem then to you. I'm sorry.
No, it is a problem for me now because I have planned things, right?
Right.
And if something threatens for that to happen and not to happen, I feel like, no, I want this to, I want to control it. But if I know that I'm not in control anyway, it becomes less of a problem, right?
Sure.
See, we're not, as you said, we're not in control of being young, and we can accept that. Though we go through stages where we feel older and kind of sad, but then we move on. And that is kind of, can be put on the same scale. Like, things happen. If we see things like that, how does it connect with being materialistic or not?
It doesn't.
Oh.
No connection. But both of those, but all of that is based on a conceptual framework, based on ideas. In other words, whether or not it's materialist is an idea, whether or not there's control is ideas, whether or not there's even death is ideas. We don't even know that there's death. We know what death looks like from the outside, but we don't know what it looks like from the inside. So if you died right now, it would look like something to us, but we can't say what it would look like to you. And of course, this is the problem, because what life looks like from the inside and what it looks like from the outside is very different, isn't it? I mean, I look at you and I see a body. I look at me and I see a field of experience. They're vastly different in every regard. So exactly how does death fit into that? Well, you'll know when you die. But more profoundly, what this is now is what it will be in death, because death is an event that occurs in this. What this is, life is an aspect of this, death is an aspect of this, so on and so forth. But anyway, you're right, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And I have absolutely no problem with materialism. I'm a materialist myself. I think everything is atoms. But atoms don't exist in space and time.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a little 10-minute break? We'll be back in a few minutes. Online people.
Peter and Zlodjian use a lot of terms like nature of mind, nature, pure mind, and so on. How do those relate with our concept of awareness?
No, nature of mind is not awareness. Nature of mind is this. Nature of mind is the entire the functioning of the actual system.
Does awareness imply a duality?
It may imply it, but it doesn't include it. And the problem with all these terms is that they're terms of one thing and aspects of one thing. So that just because there's different words doesn't mean there's different things. You can talk about nature of mind, you can talk about awareness, you can talk about, conceptual mind, you can talk about the three kayas, you can talk about all these things, but they're all referring to the same thing, sort of making different arguments about it, but that doesn't mean that their arguments are completely valid or that the thing they're referring to conforms to the ways it's being referred to. So all these terms are disconveniences. But this is very simple. This is itself. So it's meaningful to use these terms, but that doesn't mean that the terms are really meaningfully differentiable from each other. I mean, in these conversations we use myriad words. We're talking about one thing. And just because we use 1,000 words doesn't mean there's 1,000 things. We're talking about one thing. And the nature of this one thing is so ambiguous and so slippery and so multidimensional that it can meaningfully and accommodatingly be referred to in all these different ways, and still it's just one thing. It's not different than itself. So that's the nature of the beast. But just because there's multiple words, don't assume there's multiple things. Especially. This condition here, this event, is one thing. And nowhere in itself does it imply that it's dependent upon anything else, or any subsystems, or anything outside of itself. And so all of its craziness and strangeness and different information content and all that is just an aspect of what it is.
Peter, when you talk about the strangeness, are you referring to the linear way of thinking, or the conceptual models, or what? How do you define strangeness?
Well, strangeness is hard to define because it's very strange.
It's hard to define or to find?
Both.
I think strangeness is everywhere.
Well, yes. Okay, it's easy to find. Hard to define.
Well, we settled that.
By strangeness, I try to indicate the way that experience does not make any sense in a very profound, radical way. It's not like it just doesn't make sense superficially, but it intrinsically doesn't make sense on a very basic level. And that's very strange.
Well,
I want to indicate that because it's easy to see this simplistically as something sort of that's integral and solid, and it's just a thing that it happens to be, and it's here, and that's very interesting, and it has a few interesting aspects. But no, this is at the very core of what this is. It is unutterably weird, strange, bizarre, inconceivable, dizzying, maddening.
I could say maddening, yeah.
Yeah, but maddening in like hardcore psychotic way, not maddening like a little bit annoying. Maddening like take a machete and go out and become a serial killer kind of thing. I don't know if I conveyed effectively what I was trying to say about strangeness here.
It seems like you're referencing just all of the seeminess that's happening, and that's the strangeness.
Yeah, but there's nothing but seemingness.
Right.
There's not seemingness as apart from anything else.
Right, but that seemingness to me is the weirdness and the maddening stuff. That's the weirdness to me. But it doesn't seem to be a profound strangeness, but just a strangeness that's associated with experience.
Okay, yeah. Well, experience is strange. All the seemingness is strange, but more profoundly, there's a radical, fundamental strangeness behind the whole thing, in the sense that it can't be found. I mean, this is right here. Everything is this. Everything is based on this, and yet this is completely can't be found. It's unfindable. That's pretty strange. Everything is this, but you can't find it. I mean, literally, you can't find it. Experience is right here, but you can't find it. You try and find experience.
You can't find experience, but you can experience experience, which is
it doesn't go away. You can experience it, of course. But what is it? What is it that when there's experience? Can you find what that is? You can't find it. You can't find it. Which is very strange. I'm saying it's very strange. Maybe it's not strange.
So you can't find a source of experience.
Yeah, you can't find a source, you can't find a body of it, you can't find anything of it, except its evidence is undeniable because there's nothing but. So all this is the evidence of experience. All this is the proof of the functioning of a machine that you can't find the machine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even though you can hear the noise of it.
Yeah, on no level can you actually get to the bottom of what anything actually is. Can you actually find anything? And there's a fundamental strangeness in that to me. There's a fundamental bizarreness. There's a fundamental lack of coherence. It doesn't cohere. It doesn't fit in with itself.
I'm thinking that if we all agreed to that and all started, I would agree that it's all bizarre, it would create less conflict. All it would create is love and appreciation, because conflict comes of, wrong expectations and assumptions that can't be verified.
Sure.
So if we all agree that it's totally bizarre, what is there to argue about, right?
No argument from me. See? It worked.
What happened to the machete happen?
Yeah, I was waiting for
That
that.
can happen too. And there's no problem there. Love can look like that.
Exactly.
Peter, just as it's strange, it is also love.
It's totally love. And harmony.
And harmony. And completely at one.
Another really obvious aspect that demonstrates its strangeness is that anything you can say about it that is true, really profoundly true, you can also see is completely untrue. And you could also say exactly the opposite thing and find that it's profoundly true, and also see the way that it's not true, which is a little strange, arguably.
Can you give an example?
Well, let's say anything about this. How about I don't know.
It's infinite.
It's infinite, sure. It's infinite.
It's all good.
It's all good. It's infinite, yet you can find finiteness. Finiteness is really obvious. And yet, there's no finiteness. Infinity is really obvious. So you can find finiteness. It's all good, but it all sucks. No intelligent person would argue with that statement. But still, it's all good. But that's just sort of playing games with it. But in a profound sense, you can see it very meaningfully. See a way that it really seems to be, and then you can see it exactly the opposite way, and it can seem to be that as profoundly. Or to put it in more general terms, probably more specific terms, this is clearly exactly itself, but you can't ever find what that is. You can't ever say what that is. You can't ever find it, even though it is clearly and most obviously itself. It doesn't depart from itself. Experience is experience, and yet you can't find experience. You can't ever pin it down. You can't ever get to the bottom of it. You can't ever, okay, now I've got it. This is experience. Yeah, okay, try here. This is it. Can't be done. It's slippery. You go looking for experience and you don't find anything. And when you don't find anything, you found it, because that's its nature. Its nature is unfindable. It's unfindable, but it doesn't depart from itself. Which is all dizzying and weird and strange, you might say. But it can be very powerful to notice how, I use the word transcendental similarly with the word strange, because I call it transcendental because it transcends itself. It transcends any way of taking it to be. So you go looking for it, and it's not there. And it can be very powerful to see how truly and intrinsically transcendental this is. How elusive, how undescribably subtle and miraculous this is. This is not just your garden variety thing that's just sort of sitting there, inert and uninteresting. On the contrary, it's very, very strange and miraculous and perplexing qualities that don't seem to converge or resolve into any kind of whole or meaningful gestalt that you can get any kind of handle on at all.
just to clarify in my mind what I often try to understand what you mean by not being able to find anything. And I often think that I should ask the question, what would finding something, what's an example of finding something?
Sure.
And what is this the idea that, say, I finding something to my satisfaction, I defined it to the point where that definition holds under all conditions?
Sure, you could say that. And not necessarily in conceptual terms, but in any kind of sense of resolving it into a coherent whole, into a stable, coherent whole that is, say, revisitable. I mean, example, try and find the taste of chocolate. What exactly is a taste of chocolate? Well, you recognize it instantly. I mean, you taste chocolate, it's like, wow, that tastes like chocolate. But what is the taste of chocolate?
No way.
No way. You go looking for it, and it's right there, it's right here, it's obvious, but it's, it's mirage-like in the sense that it doesn't resolve into, oh yeah, that's the taste of chocolate, right there, exactly. No, not to the left, not to the left, yeah, right there, that's it. It's not like that, is it? It's strange because it's very, very specific and obvious. It's really obvious chocolate tastes exactly like chocolate. You know to taste of chocolate in an instant. And if someone handed you some bacon and said it's chocolate, you'd say, bullshit, I don't taste any chocolate. But what exactly is it? Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, if they were alive even enough to bring you the damn bacon. But anyway.
Well, what about a solid object? How would you
Same thing.
Say I have a diamond ring, a huge diamond, a very solid thing. It's like the core of the sun or something. It's very, very dense and solid.
Sure.
And I define this as diamond.
Sure.
Then I look more deeply. How does that disappear?
Because it has no coherence. What exactly is it? Here's a bottle. So we don't have a diamond to demonstrate, so I'll use a bottle. We can pretend this is a diamond, but we can talk about bottle instead of diamond. So here's a bottle. So what does it look like? So, what color is it? What shape is it? How big is it? This is the bottle too. This is what the bottle looks like sometimes. This is what it 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 feels like. 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 So where's the bottle? I instantly recognize it when I see it, but every time I see it, I've never seen it that way before. Because I see it from a slightly different angle and a slightly different light. Now we may suppose, if we subscribe to the materialist hypothesis, that there is an actual bottle that is solid and stable, and it seems to be so variable because of the vagaries of my observing properties. But as far as I know, the bottle only exists as an experience. There may or may not be some objective bottle stably existing somewhere, but I have no access. I can't prove that or disprove it. I can't access that universe. The only universe I can access is the universe of my experience, where the bottle's an experience. And exactly what experience is the bottle? Well, it's an infinite continuum of different experiences. Right? And so where's the bottle? Which one's the bottle? So you recognize the bottle, but, what is it? Where is it? You can't find it.
There isn't a single thing in my experience called a bottle.
Yeah.
Or I can call it a bottle. But
it's not just that it's not single, it's not coherent. It doesn't hang together. It doesn't clump together as a whole. It doesn't tend to, all the versions of itself don't tend to attract themselves together to sort of stick together and they're sort of just all over the place and it,
The only thing that I can say is consistent and constant, never changes, is if I slap a concept of that on it.
Right.
But
And
the thing itself.
yeah. And in actuality, the concept changes too, but since you define it as not changing, every time you recreate it in a new form that has changed, you've declared it hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how five senses integrate our experience into something one? How do you see that?
Yeah, well, they don't. I mean, that's the interesting thing, is they don't really. The five senses exist, obviously. We have our different fields of experience, and we have other fields of experience. We have the field of experience of thought. We may have the field of experience of some other kinds of subtle energy experiences, or God knows what, right? So there's all of this different experience of different qualities, and yet, these different experiences don't have a whole lot to do with each other. Or let's say their interrelationship is very sketchy and inconsistent. So, and yet, we manage to function in this energy environment as we do. And we can't figure out how, you can't pin down how that happens. You can't pin down how functioning happens. You can't pin down how intelligence works. I mean, how do I know how to reach and pick up this cup? I know how to do it. I can't definitively pin down exactly how.
There was very little. You used your senses, but different senses. You touch the cup, you see the cup, but you're saying that there is no obvious integration between the signals that you're sort of processing or something like that.
Well, not that it can be pinned down. There's an empirical integration in the sense that it all seems to work together, right? But I can't, find dots that are connected and pulling on each other or something. I mean, you can't. I can say that it's connected, and I can say, well, there's demonstration that it works together at least, whether or not it's actually connected because of the functionality. But we can't really pin down how that works. I mean, how do you recognize someone? You see someone you haven't seen in a year, and yet you look at them and you go, oh yeah, you're so and so. Well, you can just do it. You can say, well, I have I saw their face and so I remember it. But last time you saw them, they probably had a different haircut, and they probably had different makeup, and they were probably wearing different clothes, and you can just do it. You're able to do it. And we can design software programs that can do it too. How does that work?
Yeah, two experiences meeting people after 30 years not seeing them. They were recognizable, some.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, 30 years that's respectable. But how we can observe these things working, and we can observe what we say about it, but we can't get to the bottom of what the elements we're talking about really, what they really do. So I recognize you, I look at you, I see the shape of your face, and I recognize you in correlation with my memory. But I can't say what memory is or how it works. I can't say what seeing is or how it works. So we'd say, oh yeah, I see you, and I correspond to patterns that I see with what's in my memory, and it's sufficiently similar that I can say, yeah, that's Irina. But I don't know what any of those words actually refer to. I don't know what memory is. I know it by experience, I know what it looks like to me. But when I really go and, okay, what is memory? I mean, really go and look at memory, okay. Remember something and see what happens when you do that. How does that work? What's going on there? It's very strange.
There's an interesting difference. You can remember the taste of chocolate, but you would probably have a hard time remembering smells or pain. There is some difference between those.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe you can't remember the taste of chocolate. You can say you're remembering it. You can say, I'm remembering chocolate right now, but then if you took a bite of chocolate, there would probably be a difference to the experience of tasting it and what you're remembering. I don't know. But, all of that is, the important point is all of this does what it does, but we can't really say what's actually happening, and we can't really say how it happens. Because we get to a certain point and we're just designating things that are mysterious. Memory is mysterious. How the mind works is mysterious. How the mind pictures things is mysterious. How the mind draws correlations is mysterious.
You're saying that correlation between the five senses are as vague as between our memories and what we're seeing. Just some vagueness, something comes together magically.
Well, I think essentially something comes together magically, and magically in this case is a euphemism for we can't describe how it works, so it may as well be magic.
In a sense, it's sort of, well, if you compare this to a dream, like a dream I had last night, very detailed about a car. But even in the dream, I sort of knew that it was sort of vague, or I can't tell you what kind of car it was. I think I knew that. I knew the color, but there was so much that I didn't know. I didn't know the road I was driving on. It was somewhat familiar, and in the same way, if you can, the only difference is for some reason in waking, we just identify so much, and it's not really any more definite than in a dream, is it? In a sense.
I would say generally it is a different order of there's a different order of acuity with how the mind is differentiating what it's experiencing. I think in the dreams there tends to be a slightly more sloppiness.
Yeah.
With the mind bothering to pin down exactly what anything is, and I think in the waking life, the mind has a tendency to do that more sharply. But still, it's doing it in a context of alternate vagueness.
Alternate what?
Alternate vagueness.
Yeah.
So what presents itself is always slightly fuzzy, slightly unresolved. And the mind tries to counter that by sharpening things up, but it does so with abstractions rather than with concreteness, and it masquerades as concreteness.
Yeah.
So I see some car and I see the logo and I say, oh, that's a Lexus. And the mind pretends that it's sharpened it up. But the actual experience of the car as it's going past me is a blur of color and shapes, and the shapes are changing as it moves past me, and different lights are shining off it, and all of this. And all of that is moving and a little sort of fuzzy edged and not really razor sharp.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm not wearing my glasses.
We gain some kind of a sharpness or to what you said, but
well, the mind
doing that,
pretends
we
to.
lose so much else.
Well,
Fullness.
it's not that you lose the fullness, it's that you may be distracted from noticing the fullness.
Right.
And again, this is exactly what I recommend working with noticing, is to be with the fullness of your experience, be with all the layers of it, rather than just going to the mentalized sort of software process, sharpened up version of it that your mind generates in the context of sensory experience.
So like Photoshop.
Yeah, sure. Like you hit a sharpening filter and all of a sudden it's like everything is, or the edges get sharper or something. And the mind is constantly doing this, and that's real. That actually happens too.
Yeah.
And it pretends to be a sharpening, but in actuality the mind itself is not that sharp. The mind is a little fuzzy too. And the mind as a present actuality is a present fuzziness, just as the sensory information also is a little ambiguous and fuzzy and indeterminate, and so on and so forth. And the point is to just see that as it is. It doesn't matter that the mind does its thing. None of these things matter. The point is to see them as they are in context, in their actual context, rather than letting for example, the mind's interpretation dominate, and where you just go to that and let that sort of trump the rest of your experience. In short, it's just to experience uncensored what you're actually experiencing. That's all. And the mind is a powerful censor. It has a tendency to show up as a kind of a censorship.
Believing is seen. Believing is seen.
Right, exactly so. Yeah. And we do this unconsciously and automatically, by and large. But we can't. But since it's actually happening here in consciousness, we can observe it, and then see that whole phenomena happening, and see the context that it happens in, and then you can settle into the actuality of your experience, rather than living this sort of hyped up, bizarre, mentalized process version that we usually think of as our normal waking state. And the implications of doing that are powerful. The point isn't you just do that and it's interesting or fun. The point is you do that and there's an entirely different perspective on what this is and what's going on and what you are and what your life is and what the world is from that perspective than from the mentally processed version which we're sort of familiar with.
There certainly have been many people who have sort of defined that theoretically, and as an academic, I mean, it's all that stuff is very well known, and yet for that, even though people have studied and written all sorts of papers on it, I mean, actually doing it, I mean, like dropping those filters and dropping those categorizations and dropping all that definition is extremely difficult. Because it just happens so instantaneously.
But again, my trick is that you don't need to stop doing that. You don't need to actually drop it. It's kind of like with the attachment and aversion. You don't need to battle that stuff and somehow shut it down, which is a huge labor. You can bypass it because even as all that's happening, the raw data is sitting there, plain to see. So you can just sort of step around it or undercut it and go to your raw sensory information nakedly. And even if the processing is going on over here, the raw sensory experience is happening over here. It hasn't gone anywhere. So it's accessible, and just by noticing that, you can turn the tides and turn the whole thing upside down without needing to stop or somehow turn down your mental functioning at all.
The best thing that seems to be working for me is just continuing to let go, just let go.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's still.
But the actuality of letting go is a kind of it's almost tactile. It's a kind of it's moving into the texture of experience. It's whatever it means to you. But that's like for me. If I said, okay, let go, is a kind of a, it's a specific reorienting to a sort of a soupy richness that is actually here, which is exactly what I'm talking about, because then you're being with the texture of your experience rather than being with it in the context of what you're holding it to be. Again, without needing to necessarily stop, I have to stop my mind, I have to stop thinking, I have to shut that stuff off, which is, if not impossible, at least extremely difficult.
It's like having background music.
It's a new notion of sensation.
So we do that deliberately sometimes.
Yeah, I was like, wait, that's normal.
I think she's got to sort of know. Wait a little bit.
It seems to me too that I notice that my expectation of finding anything is greatly diminished. So it just becomes all of the it's like if you take away the expectation that there is anything to find, then there's no point in even looking and trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah,
and
that's huge.
Then there's more just like the ship floating in the sea, without expecting to get to any land.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's a lot of paradox in that. There's a lot of sense of, the powerlessness, but then there's a sense of enjoyment. And there's a freedom, and it goes back and forth between those experiences. And
because the expectation of something to find is like a carrot on a string. You pull, all of a sudden, bang! I've got an orientation, I've got a target, I've got a goal, I'm locked in, I'm on the, and you never get to the carrot because it's on a string. It's out there somewhere, Well, and the fact is, it only exists in imagination. And what if there's no carrot? Then what?
Right.
Well, I don't know. Here I am. What's going to happen? I don't know. See what happens. And all of a sudden it's a different thing. It's less obsessed, it's less targeted, it's less locked in. It's more open, it's more inclusive. And in that is an opportunity to orient to the fullness of your experience rather than just sort of compartmentalized thing. Yeah, that's huge. That's powerful.
And then sometimes, I do appear to run into something, at which point I can look and say, like, is there really anything that I've run into? And if I look closely, I find, it's unclear, and maybe that holds me in a certain configuration for a period of time, and then it seems to move. And so I don't know what that is about, but that's what seems to be happening. Having left the shore, being on the great ocean.
Well, that's where we are. I mean, we're in this weirdness that is doing itself, and every now and then it seems to be something, or every now and then it presents itself as having certain qualities, and they're weird, and we look at them and we say, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I wonder what it is. And eventually, before long, it goes away, of course, because everything always goes away. And then we might think, I wonder what that was.
Well,
and never the next thing.
Even being able to name them is of no value.
Of course.
There's not even that satisfaction where there used to be some sort of psychic interpretation of events. Yeah. Being able to, I think it's X. Yeah. And then, even that's not really relevant or helpful at this point.
No. And there's this constant dance, this constant symphony of different energies that present themselves as different configurations of qualities and experiences and vibes and moods and energy, whatever. It's just always just flowing through our experience and just, presenting this and presenting that, and sometimes we're like this and sometimes we're like this, and and you never can pin any of it down. It's always just, wow, that's just another weird energy. Of course, and then here comes another one, and you can, and we're all experts at being able to say, oh yeah, I'm feeling this way because of such and such. But in actual fact, you know, if you just look at it, it's just weird vibes coming through. And just these weird energies that just unceasing, like tides or weather, just unceasingly morph through our experience and impart their flavor.
Mm. So it sort of eliminates even partiality, because, you know, that's only an objective experience anyway.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Is that possible? An objective experience?
Well, I mean, just in our minds, that's what we've existed with in the past, believing that we know what things are, and, you know, actually finding that we didn't really know what they were, but it's that dumbing down thing.
Yeah. But when you're with the amorphous actuality, the actual presence that you can't pin down, versus being with the thing you can pin down, which is not present, not actual, and not inclusive, you know, it's a vast difference. Because the actuality is powerful, because it's actual, because it's real. It has power, it has meaning, it has connection. Even if you can't make heads or tails of it, it still is intrinsically connected. It conveys power, it conveys meaning, it conveys fullness, it conveys process. So so that letting go into the flow is actually very empowering.
Well, this, you were talking about realization before, about I forget exactly what your words. Not being sort of moving into a sense of it being like a normal experience that you formerly hadn't seen was there. In talking about the death metaphor, it's sort of a similar kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Is that suddenly everything that we thought was a certain way is no longer relevant. I mean, it is hard to say what else is going on at that point. Mm-hmm. But it's just sort of like inverting everything backwards.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we discover our experience isn't what we thought, what we used to thinking it is, that's very interesting. And you can't say what it is, but it's a big reorientation. But it allows a direct engagement with actuality. I mean, which again, paradoxically, is always the case. Of course, we're always directly engaged with actuality, because where else could we be? But we complicate it and convolute it with all of our mental interpretations, whereas if you just see it as it actually is, which includes the mental interpretations to the extent they actually are, then we're living directly, authentically, rather than convolutedly, semi-authentically.
But if you're actually experiencing that, if this applies, practically, how would you... So when you talk to people and you're in that experience, or you are aware of full experience, then how are you relating to folks? I mean, one of my colleagues comes up to me and holds up a paper and says, well, what do you think of this? And I think, that's not even a this. I mean, how do I mean, conversing with regular folks really sort of forces me into, I don't know, I want to say playing the game, but that's not really what I'm thinking. If you stand up and hold up that chair and say, well, what is this? And I could say, I don't know. It's going to be a little difficult to be on some sort of a working relationship with polite society.
Sure. But the thing is that polite society actually works that way, although it just doesn't acknowledge this. Because saying this is a chair is just what's a chair? A chair is a designation for something that I don't know what it is, which is differentiable as being like this in some undescribable way.
Right.
But you don't need to go through that deconstruction. Someone can say, it's a chair, and you go, yeah. Or you can say, I don't know what it is, and you can go, yeah. And that's two ways of saying the same thing. So if someone comes up to you and, hey, we're involved in such and such, and we got to do such and such, and we need you on board with this, and what do you think about that? You can instantaneously translate what they're actually talking about. You don't need to go to what they think they're talking about. You can go to what they're actually talking about and relate to that, and they'll think you're relating to what they think they're talking about, because it's actually one and the same thing.
Yeah.
See, if we talk about this unknown thing and then someone else talks about a chair, they're talking about the same thing. They might not know it if you insist on using one language or another, but you can translate language. Since you're talking about the same thing, you can translate languages or translate whole semantic systems, and it works fine. So you can talk to people who are working within a really constrained belief system from outside of that belief system, and they won't necessarily know it. They might not agree with what you have to say, but that's the case no matter where you are. I mean, no matter where you're orienting from. Right? So you can answer people in their own terms without needing to leave your terms, because their own terms actually are your terms. They're just translated convolutedly through their conceptual system, but they're still ultimately dealing with the same thing.
I mean, nothing here is inherently changed. This is one of the rare places we have where we can actually talk in a different way about this.
Yeah,
but we don't have to worry about what other people might think.
Yeah, there's no rules. There's no rules, communication rules here. You can talk about anything in any way from any perspective, and you're talking about the same thing. You're talking about this. And you can talk about this as this, or you can talk about this as, the ElCerrito hills in this kind of nice neighborhood with the nice hills and blah, 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 blah. And it's just different words for the same thing. So you're just not like there's two things.
There's no conflict of interest.
Yeah, there's no conflict. Because it ultimately, because reality is the great integrator. And there ain't nobody dealing with anything but reality, because there's nothing else to deal with. So the most whacked out people that live in the most heady, whacked out people that are living in the clouds in their own mental definitions are actually dealing with reality. They just do it in a very convoluted and maybe inefficient way, in terms of needing to translate everything in terms of this. There's some heavy-handed semantic system.
Well, I think I'm still going to have some difficulty, particularly when it comes to things like assessments. So what do you think? Is this good or bad? And I think to myself, I was like, I don't care anymore. If it's good for you, then I guess it's good. If it's not good for you, then it's not.
Well, yeah, but an assessment is in terms of is in a particular terms, in a particular reference. So, is this good? There's an implication there. Is it good in terms of X, Y, Z, or in terms of whether you like it or whether you think it's going to be effective in some context, or whatever, right? And you can read between the lines of what that context is and answer truthfully in terms of where the reality of your orientation to it fits in with regards to that context. So again, it's kind of just a cross-translation. You can still be genuinely in your perspective and just translate it into the terms that corresponds to what your perspective would look like in terms of their perspective. I mean, I'm very, very familiar with this, because this is basically what I do.
Yes.
My experience is basically of a completely non-verbal, sparkling field of light. That's what my experience is. And people come up to me and they talk about this or that or the other and ask me questions about it or discuss it or whatever. And I look at this sparkling field of light in the context of their question and see how that fits. But I don't leave that and pretend I'm inhabiting the universe they think that they're inhabiting or they think I'm inhabiting. Because it translates, because in actuality they're talking about the same sparkling field of light, whether or not they know it. And so then it's just a matter of verbal skills, which is, it's no problem. You have them to the extent you do, and that's not going to go away.
But even if you have an awareness that this is all whatever it is, indescribable something, you can still have likes and desires and
totally.
Personality and
all
you can
that.
Still make assessments whether this is good.
All that. But all of that is sparkling light.
Oh, absolutely, but it doesn't.
But someone else might think we'd call it that, which is fine.
Yeah,
because again, it's just a matter of terminology. It's really a matter of translating languages.
But if I say I like strawberries, it means something completely different to the hearer than it does to me.
Right, exactly.
But it doesn't matter.
Of course, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't, because you can still communicate, and the people you're talking to, they don't know what world you're coming from anyway. I mean, we're expert at pretending that we're all, because we use the same words, we're expert at pretending we're coming from the same place, where in actuality that's self-evidently absurd. We're each completely off in our own personal psychosis, right? and we're very good at it's making it seem like we are, making it seem like, well, we're all together, and we all sort of think alike, and we all have the same time. We're all different, and we all think differently, and we all have different opinions, and we all, completely, each of ours version of an ideal world, we're completely different than anyone else's.
Well, and that's the wonder of reality, is that it produces each person's experience to be completely tailored to their no matter how the light comes in, it's like we end up with our own version of whatever.
Everyone is the sole inhabitant of their own universe, and that's self-evidently true, and it's delightful. It's wonderful because you do get this nice custom-tailored universe that is you. And totally conforms to your nature. Not wow, what could be? The shoe fits, and everyone else is demonstrably some other universe for some other norms, But we have a certain skill at interfacing, our semantic skills and verbal skills and behavioral skills. We can dress in certain ways and go through certain rituals that are designed to be interfaces to enable us to sort of co-function and pretend we're on the same boat even when we manifestly aren't. I want to look at that. It's just quitting time. It's saved by the bell.